With Election Day right around the corner, states across the country, including our home state here of Pennsylvania, are using mail-in ballots more than they ever have before in the 2020 elections. But how do these mail-in ballots work? And with so many changing regulations, what do you need to know if you plan to vote by mail? Tom Shortell, a reporter for the Allentown Morning Call, has been covering this issue in depth, and he joins us to discuss those questions and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. Voting by mail. Many states across the country, including our home state here of Pennsylvania, are instituting voting by mail in 2020. But it's not without questions. As so many people vote by mail for the first time, there are a lot of questions about how do they get their ballots? When do they get their ballots? And there are continuously changing rules and regulations. Tom Shortell, reporter for the Allentown Morning Call, friend of our program, has been covering this issue in depth, and he joins us now. Tom, welcome back to Face the Issues.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
It's good to have you back. I want to start generally, and for our viewers who watch this program, they're going to say, wait, hold on, you covered this issue not that long ago. We had John Cole, the managing editor of Politics PA, on talking about the change to voting by mail. But in those months, so much has changed. And so it becomes imperative for us to keep you at home up to date. That's what we do here on the show. Tom, I want to start generally. Mailing in our votes, voting by mail, this is something that is new to Pennsylvania, where anyone can vote by mail, not just absentee ballots.
That's right. Back in November, it was a bipartisan issue. The General Assembly changed the election code so that anyone could vote by mail if they wanted to. Previously, you needed an excuse. The absentee ballots, when you're like out of town or ill or something like that, Pennsylvania's had that since the War of 1812.
Okay.
But mail-in ballots for anyone at large who either just didn't feel like waiting in line or had something else to do that day, or just wanted to vote early. This is the first time they will be able to do that in a general election.
Okay. So this was not stirred on because of the COVID-19 crisis then? This was something that the state had planned to do?
Yes. I believe that this was a bipartisan deal, and it was partly tied to getting rid of the party line vote. It used to be that you could go in and check, and you could check all Republicans or all Democrats by just checking a single box. And the compromise was they got rid of that, but then made mail-in ballots widely available.
Understood. And what's the difference? There's a lot of debate about the difference between the mail-in ballot and the absentee ballot. Is there a difference?
Technically, yes. Practically, not really.
Okay.
They're essentially the same deal. The absentee ballot is it's technically a separate item, but that's because the Pennsylvania Constitution specifically says there will be absentee ballots for these specific reasons. And so they had to go in and add general mail-in ballots, but they do the exact same thing. One is for people who are sick or will be traveling and are not in their hometown at the time, and mail-ins are for anyone else. So it's they really opened it up to try to make it voting more accessible.
Okay. And one of the other questions that I think we hear a lot, and it is confusing because national news talks about this as if every state is running by the same process, which is not the case. So no. In Pennsylvania, I know some states, few of them, but some states are doing or at least proposing the idea of mailing out a ballot to everyone, the voter rolls. Is that happening in Pennsylvania, or do you need to actually request your ballot?
In Pennsylvania, you need to request your ballot.
Okay.
The easiest way to do that, if you're tech savvy, is to go online to the state website, and you can do it there. You can also go to your local county elections office and make a request in person. We're getting to the point, we're getting to the point where people should be able to do that and get a ballot the same day or close to, where you can just go into the election office. If you are not signed up to get a mail-in ballot yet, you can physically pick one up there.
Okay. So, Tom, I want to ask you this then. Can you walk us through what somebody should do if they're saying, I like to vote by mail? They go in, get their ballot, or they request one. Can you walk us through the process? What do they have to do after they've made that request? And, follow-up question to that, when do those ballots arrive?
That's a good point. The counties had originally hoped to be releasing their ballots, getting them out by late September. They're still more or less on that timeline. They experienced some delays. There was a court battle over a third-party candidate who was trying to get onto the ballot. That kind of pushed them back. Most counties now hope to mail theirs out by the first week of October, maybe even late September still. So by the time this airs, those ballots should be in the mail for people who've already requested them. What time they arrive or not depends on how well the postal service is up to that task, and that's not entirely clear right now.
Right. Well, and let me ask you about that. There's a lot of debate right now about the Postal Service. Obviously, members of the House of Representatives have tried to subpoena the Postmaster General. A lot of debate about the Postal Service. At this point, and there's a lot of talk, right? You hear a lot of politicians who are up for election or re-election talking about whether or not the Postal Service can be trusted, whether or not mail-in voting is subject to fraud. Anything can happen, but generally speaking, how secure is voting by mail?
There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud by mail. It does happen. I believe the last time it happened in Pennsylvania was 2018, but these are generally pretty rare. Millions of people have voted in the last 4 years, and a conservative think tank that I was looking at found approximately 1,200 cases. And so that's a lot. You have to consider that's over a 4-year period for every election in the country. Those are the known ones. So generally speaking, national security experts have weighed in on this. Mail-in ballots are believed to be secure. There is no reason to suspect otherwise.
And I appreciate you clarifying that, because I think a lot of people would like to vote by mail, but there's concern. The other side of that is that if you want to vote in person, this is just an option, correct? Pennsylvania is now giving you 2 ways to vote in the election.
That's right. There's nothing preventing you from going to the polls and voting in person. And in fact, if you requested a mail-in ballot, and then by the time it gets to you, you don't feel secure with it anymore, if that's your personal choice, you don't want to use it anymore, you can take that ballot with you and the envelopes it came in. You can go to your polling place and tell them that you've changed your mind and you want to vote in person. They will take that ballot and the envelopes and void it and allow you to vote in person at that point. It's important that you take the envelopes and the ballot with you for that to happen. Otherwise, you can still vote with a provisional ballot. That's kind of like an emergency backup ballot that they only count after they confirm that you did not mail your mail-in ballot.
Okay. And so this is really just giving Pennsylvania an extra choice on how they want to vote. Tom, I want to start talking about some of these changes that we're seeing in Pennsylvania to the mail-in ballots. In the primary, the governor, by executive order, extended the deadline by which to receive the ballots in just 7 counties across the state. But this has been extended for the general election, I believe, in all 67 counties. When do mail-in ballots need to be postmarked by, and when do counties need to receive them by?
The ballots must be postmarked by Election Day.
Okay.
If they're anytime before that or by Election Day. They must arrive at the county office by the Friday after Election Day in order for them to be counted. If you're an international voter or if you're a military member overseas, there's that rule doesn't apply to you. There's different laws that apply there, but for the rest of us, it needs to arrive by the if it's postmarked, it needs to be postmarked by election day and arrive at your county election office by the following Friday.
So what would you recommend for those who want to vote by mail? When would you recommend they get that ballot in the mail to make sure their vote gets there?
I would recommend at least a week ahead of time, at least a week before election day.
Okay.
That would give you 10 days for it to get there. But honestly, I may not recommend that you mail it. If it is convenient for you, if you're comfortable going into government offices at this point, you can drop it off at your local election office.
Okay.
This way you don't have to worry about the mail working on time. It's just you need to physically be the one to go in. You can't take your spouses or your girlfriends or your mothers. But if you take your ballot, go to your local election office, you can turn it in and they will accept it, and you'll have 100% certainty that it arrives before election day.
Okay, so you could turn it, so you don't need to mail your vote in. You could take the ballot and bring it in directly yourself.
Yes, you can. You can take it. Yeah, every county will allow that. Some counties are in the process of setting up drop boxes, essentially just a secure iron lock box that is checked every day. Not all counties are doing that, and some are still figuring out if they want to do that or if they can afford to do that, because there's provisions tacked on to that practice. But every county will accept your ballot at their local election office, so long as you do it before election. Do it either on or before election day.
Okay, that's good information. Tom, don't go away. I want to continue right where we left off. We're going to go to the break and we'll come back. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Tom, thanks again for joining us. This is such an important issue, but yet an issue that so many of our viewers, so many voters in our communities are confused about, and not because of no good reason. The rules have somewhat been changing as the state attempts to really clarify and make sure as many people who want to vote in this election can vote. When we left off, you were talking about bringing ballots back in, saying, hey, look, if you want to vote by mail, but you're not sure if the Postal Service will get there in time, bring it in. Now, one of the things you said, Tom, and I just want to get clarification on this. You said that if you're mailing it, it needs to be postmarked by Election Day, and it can arrive by that Friday. But if you are going to hand deliver it, it needs to be in on Election Day, no later than Election Day. You don't get that 3 days till Friday.
That's correct. You don't. You have until 8 p.m. on Election Day to get your ballot in if you are physically handing in a ballot, or if you're waiting in line just voting in person. It's the same rule applies there. It's basically the state is trying to determine that you have cast your ballot and it was out of your hands by 8 p.m. on Election Day.
Got it. Now, you mentioned something called drop boxes before we went to break, and you said not every county is doing them. What are drop boxes? What's the idea? And what counties are in, as far as we know?
Well, drop boxes they're kind of just like the large mailboxes you see outside on the corner, except they are for collecting ballots. They're also more closely guarded than your standard blue mailbox. The rules for that are that they must be under surveillance at all times when the public can access them, and that they are checked at least once every 24 hours, and so someone will remove that. There needs to be a seal on the box to make sure no one's tampered with it, and a certified employee of the county or a contractor of the county will collect those, bring it to the election office, and then the election office will store them until they're ready to be counted on Election Day. As far as which counties are doing that, that is still kind of up in the air right now for many of them. Some of them have decided up front that no, we don't like them, we're not going to do it. And while others are still figuring out what they want to do, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court only approved this I think it was November 17th, September 17th. And so there hasn't been a lot of time for people for counties to formulate plans. Yesterday, Lehigh County, excuse me, I shouldn't say yesterday, on September 24th, a week after the ruling, the Lehigh County came out and said that they're going to be using 5 drop boxes, one in each commissioner's district. And we've posted we posted that information online in our story at mcall.com. And Lehigh County should have that information on its website as well. So the main one is at the Lehigh County Government Center in Center City, Allentown. That's at 17 South 7th Street in Allentown.
Okay. And what for counties that are concerned about that? What's the fear? Is the fear that they can be tampered with, or?
I'm not entirely sure of that. The counties here in the Lehigh Valley have been supportive of them. Some of the concern is that they're afraid that people might just start. Maybe that they're concerned that they're stuffing the boxes with fraudulent ballots. But I'm honestly not sure of why they're opposed to it. I haven't run into that here. Some Republicans had opposed them because they were not specifically allowed in the original legislation. They weren't no one said you couldn't do it, but they also weren't in there either. And so there was some debate over whether it was legal or not. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just recently made that decision.
Fair enough. Now, I want to pivot to 2 things that were, again, recently decided in Pennsylvania and could lead to some confusion. One of them is naked ballots. And this is a big issue because if ballots are naked, according to this most recent decision, then they will not be counted. So what's a naked ballot? What do voters who vote by mail need to be sure to do to avoid naked ballots?
So when you have a mail-in ballot, you get the ballot itself. You fill that out. You select the candidates you want to support. Then you stick that into a plain white envelope that comes with your ballot. There's no address or anything on it. I forget the exact language on the front, but it's basically a plain white ballot. That is called the secrecy ballot. That is to make sure that your sacred vote isn't being tracked necessarily to you, because it's supposed to be a secret ballot. That secret ballot with the ballot that secret envelope with the ballot inside of it then goes inside a mailing envelope.
Okay.
The mailing envelope there's already a stamp on it or postage mark on it, has the address of your local county elections office, and on the back there is a spot where the voter needs to sign it. Sign their name and attest that they are complying with state law on state election law. So what they call a naked ballot is when people forget that middle envelope. When they just stick the ballot in the mailing envelope. Those votes will not be counted if they arrive without that secrecy envelope.
Why is that? What was the reason given for that decision?
Well, that one is specifically spelled out in the law that it needs to be in there.
Okay.
And I believe that, like I said, it goes back to kind of your sacred, because it goes back to your sacred your sacred right to a secret vote. You don't have to have anyone looking over your shoulder to make sure that you voted for the person. Like back in the day, I'm from New Jersey, and you'd have these corrupt politicians who'd be making sure that their employees were voting for them.
Right.
And if they weren't, then they risk getting fired or punished or worse. So that is kind of I believe that's the reasoning there, because in order for your vote to count, you need to sign the outer envelope. So if your ballot arrives only in that envelope, then they will know who cast it. The way it works is the ballot and the secret ballot are removed. The secret envelope are removed from the mailing envelope, and then they're passed along down the line for someone else to remove from that envelope and counted. So the logistics are in place to make sure that no one really knows who cast which ballot.
Sure. Now, you talked about signing the outside ballot, and that leads to my other question. Another recent change is that the signature on the outside ballot now no longer needs to match your signature on your voting file. Now, what's the drive? Now, they still need to be signed, right? If I understand correctly, they still need to be signed, but the signatures no longer need to match.
It's not. This isn't exactly a tremendous. This is kind of what's been operating for a while.
Okay.
Like for example, I believe my voter registration card says Thomas J. Shortell, and that's how I usually sign everything. But if for some reason I signed it as Tom Shortell, that would be accepted. And it's not just necessarily the name; it's also a matter of penmanship sometimes. Sometimes people have strokes. Sometimes they develop arthritis. It can be years or decades since you signed your voter registration card. If you don't change your parties or don't move or something like that, then it may be years since the signature on file gets updated. And so as a result, just over time, your penmanship might change or improve maybe if you've been practicing, and so it may not, it may not necessarily be perfectly aligned. They do not analyze their signature to make sure that the penmanship is a match, and it does not necessarily need to match exactly. However, if like I said, I'm Tom Shortell, and if I signed it as Emperor Norton I, Protector of Mexico, that wouldn't be accepted. That would draw some flags.
Okay, so it's not as simply as if someone else signs for you, or if they're just completely illegible or it's just completely different, that they're going to count it regardless.
So if the only way that they won't count it is if the name is not close.
Okay.
So if it's John Smith and Tom Shortell, like that's obviously a flag. If it's clear, if there's signs that someone has been sending in fraudulent mail, so fraudulent ballots. So if like all the names match, but it's the same handwriting that's coming in on a lot of them, then that's going to raise some flags as well.
Sure.
And so they could reject it on those grounds. There might also be other things that flag it, but not necessarily the signatures.
Okay, that's really good information, Tom. I appreciate you running through some of these new changes for us. I know it's a confusing thing for a lot of voters, and I really appreciate your time doing that. Tom, don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Tom Shortell, thank you again for your time, for the work that you do, for joining us here. Look, this is a complicated issue that is only being made more complicated with all the changing rules and regulations.
Yeah.
This is the first year, 2020 is the first year that people in Pennsylvania can vote by mail without voting absentee. Tom, for people who are debating between voting by mail or going in person, and then people who want to vote by mail, what advice do you give them to make sure they have it done on time and that their vote counts?
Well, my first piece of advice would be do what makes you comfortable. Like you don't want to be sitting and just like anxious about whether or not your vote is counted. That's one of the most important duties you have as a citizen, and you don't want to necessarily be second guessing yourself or regretting how you cast your vote. So once you've done that, if you decide to vote in person, go and vote. Wear your mask. Do all the social distancing. Most places are requiring you to have the mask. So if you don't support the mask, for some reason, this probably isn't the time to pick that fight. If you're doing the machines or whatnot, some counties are recommending that you bring like a glove, so you're not necessarily touching the same touch screen that someone else is. If you're voting by mail, whether that's with mail-in ballots or absentee ballots, my advice would be, if you're not signed up yet, do it as quickly as you can, get as much time as you can for it to arrive and for you to send it back. You got the recent Supreme Court decision gave people a little bit more leeway on having those votes counted, but if the post office does run into major delays, you don't want to mess around with that. So do it early. If you have not yet requested a ballot, it might be, and you want to vote by mail, it might be a good idea to go to your local elections office, whichever county you're in, go to the office and request a mail-in ballot in person. You can sign up that way, and if you want, you can even finish voting in the office. So they'll hand it to you, and you don't even need to come back to drop it off. You can fill it out there, put it in the envelope, put it in both envelopes. We've already talked about that, and hand it in, and it's kind of on-demand early voting. That's this, and there's no doubt that it got in that way.
Tom, let me ask you the last question. With the extension, I was just talking to some people over at NPR, and they were asking, will we have a winner of the presidential election on election night? I jokingly laughed and said no. But now with this extension, do you think we're going to have a winner on election night?
Regardless of the extension, we were not going to know the winner on election night. I actually interviewed the Secretary of State, Pennsylvania Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar on this recently. There's just too many mail-in ballots for all the counties to do this unless they change the law. Again, the counties cannot start counting the ballots right now until 7 a.m. on election day.
Okay.
7 a.m. 7 in the morning. It's just too many ballots. Half the state is voting with a mail-in ballot. They don't have enough time to finish counting if they start at 7 a.m. There is legislation under consideration that would move that up by at least 3 days. Democrats want that moved up 3 weeks. The Republicans are at 3 days. That would go a long way to finalize, to seeing that we have a somewhat final count on election night. But the two sides are pretty far apart on a compromise, not specifically over that issue, but other issues that they can agree on. And so it's unlikely that we're going to know who won Pennsylvania until a few days later.
Wow. It is going to be a wild ride from here on out. Tom Shortell, thank you for your insights. Thank you for your time. And certainly if the rules change again, we will revisit this conversation. We'll keep you informed here. That is all the time that we have tonight. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.